consultants like the chicken, they're committed, they provide the eggs, but the pig who provides the bacon is really invested. So, when you're employee, yeah, you're completely invested in making sure that whatever you're working on comes to a successful conclusion. And both have their uses. I mean, as you mentioned, you worked across a lot of different industries. So as a consultant, you do want somebody to come in to give you. That's one of the reasons you hire consultants. You want someone to give you an outside view, and but they don't have the same commitment that your employees do. Indeed, I think that's a great distinction. So when you come into a new organization, how do you diagnose whether the constraint is technology, process design, decision making process, or along those lines, leadership alignment? Do you have a lot of political infighting going on? Do you detect that as one of the constraints?
Yeah. um I tend to have a very collaborative approach, and my approach is very much, let's listen to people, let's understand where we are, the as is, and then work with the different business functions to understand where the value lies, essentially. So for me, it's very much about that process of spending the time understanding the business and understanding the business challenges and understanding the where value gets lost, and then putting that into a well communicated, well thought strategy for the future. I think a lot of the projects that, or a lot of the initiatives that fall over or don't have the support from the organization are because they're not well communicated, when people don't have the context, they don't have the understanding, and they don't feel involved in the journey. So if you involve people in the journey, you listen to them, you make them understand how you came to those conclusions, you tend to not get into the infighting, to the challenges that you might have otherwise. Don't get me wrong, people are always going to disagree sometimes with your outcomes. They might have reluctance of change. Obviously, there's the curve of change that everyone goes through. But I think very much keeping that dialogue, that open communication, that active listening is really important to be able to still carry those people in the journey. Some will go with you willingly, some you might need to push them a little bit more towards the right outcomes.
Yes, indeed. So a couple of questions along those lines. When you come into an organization and you're listening, which I think is a wonderful first step, where do you start? So if you're going across uh, a number of different functions, I mean, do you like to start with the finance guys, or, the operations, or the customer service people? Is there a particular function that you look at first? And then the second part of that question is, when you're talking to people, do you have one-on-one conversations, or do you get everybody into a room? Because we found that it's interesting to have everybody in a room where somebody says it's like this, and somebody else says, no, it's not like that. And there's a lot of information to be gained from that. What's your approach for those two things? Who do you talk to first, and then what sort of conversations do you have?
I tend to look at all of the critical business functions. So there would always be in our organization the critical business functions. Typically, there'll be like finance, operations, technology. It depends on how the company is structured, but essentially looking at those critical operations, then having that sort of overview of how they all interact together and what they deliver for the organization. And then very much having that dialogue about with each of the functional leaders about what are their pain points, what are things that are working, things that are not working, etc., and then drilling down from there, what are the biggest pain point areas, and from those pain point areas, it depends, so there could be a group consultation or a group conversation if it's something that is much more of a wider nature. If it's a particular area very specialized on a couple of individuals, it could just be a conversation with those couple of individuals.